Hi, this is Clive Behrman, Director of Product Marketing for Cloud Extend for Salesforce. And in this video, we're going to compare and contrast Cloud Extend for Salesforce and Salesforce's own Visual Workflow. First, let's look at Cloud Extend for Salesforce. Cloud Extend for Salesforce lets you automate mundane tasks by adding process wizards or guides to common Salesforce views. These wizards are created by Salesforce users and admins using a tree-type metaphor. There's an easy-to-use WYSIWYG screen editor that requires no programming expertise. You can perform data handling with the Salesforce system without an in-depth knowledge of the Salesforce data model or schema. And finally, the native support for HTML5 means it can be used on any mobile device. Now let's look at Visual Flow. So like Cloud Extend, Visual Flow can be used to automate Salesforce tasks. However, the nature of its freeform design tool requires that developers and Salesforce end users collaborate to create workflows. The screen design is not WYSIWYG, so it's very difficult for business people to use it on their own. Visual Flow also requires programming constructs such as creating variables, assigning object IDs to variables, retrieving object IDs, and referencing variables in downstream steps. And the CloudFlow Designer is Flash-based, so it can't be used on an iPad. So in summary, Cloud Extend for Salesforce is built for business users versus Visual Flow that's really built for developers. Cloud Extend requires no programming knowledge, and that's not true for Visual Flow. You definitely need to know programming concepts. Cloud Extend for Salesforce provides all the data context to work with Salesforce objects. Salesforce Visual Flow, you need to know the schema and how those objects relate to one another. And finally, Cloud Extend for Salesforce will work on any mobile device, and Salesforce Visual Flow is Flash-based, so you can't use it on an iPad. All these things together mean that Cloud Extend for Salesforce is much quicker and easier to use than Visual Flow. But don't take my word for it. Let's see how these products work head-to-head. Let's build a telesales scripting application using both tools and see which one is the easiest to use and quickest to deploy. So in our scenario, we're going to provide the rep with a call script that's embedded inside of the lead view. And when the rep reaches the end of the telesales script, he's going to be prompted to ask a question. Can I set up an appointment, in this case, for a demo? If the prospect answers yes, then we're going to automatically create an event on the lead record, and that will contain the date and the time of the demo. And we'll also update the lead status to in process. If the prospect answers no, we're going to update the lead status to no interest. We'll also provide a third answer to demonstrate that the decision isn't binary. So let's look at the completed Cloud Extend guide, and then we'll build it. So here's the familiar lead screen, and as you can see, we've added a section called Guides. If we expand it, we can see all of the guides that are available to any Salesforce user. Clicking on the telesales script opens the telesales guide. Notice how the script contains data from Salesforce, the name of the lead, for example, and the questions at the bottom of the screen. So let's select yes. And then we'll fill in the fields to create the time for the appointment. So I'm going to select the date and the time. And then we'll press continue. Our guide is done, and the screen refreshes. We can see that the lead status has been updated, and if we scroll down, we can see an event has been created and recorded in the activity history. Cloud Extend will also provide us analytics for our guides. If we click on the outcome chart, we'll see exactly that, the outcomes for our particular guide. So yes has happened twice, no happened once, and later has also happened just once. Now let's build this guide in Cloud Extend for Salesforce. To create any guide, we press New, and here we're just going to fill in the guide properties. So the telesales script applies to the lead record. I'm going to paste in a description and a tag that will help me find it later. And here's where I put my outcomes of yes, no, and later. This will be used for the outcomes report. And then I'm going to click Apply. Clicking the blue icon brings up our screen editor. So let me add an image to our script. Here, let me pick the headphones. And we'll format the text there so we can see it a bit better. There we go. I'm going to paste in my call script. And then let me add the Salesforce data. So I'm going to go up to the drop-down box and just select the first name from the lead record. Then I'm going to paste in my question and my answers. And another nice feature is I can press preview to see what my screen and my script will look like. When I press apply, I have 3 branches that correspond to each answer. Now let's complete the yes branch. If you remember, this is where we create an event that will be added to our lead history. So creating Salesforce objects is really easy. We just select the one we want from the drop-down box, complete the form fields that supply the correct parameters, and in this case we specify the subject, the location, and the duration for the demo. The start date will be chosen by the user, and we'll complete the form by pasting an explanation for the event into the description field. The only thing left to do here is to create the screen for the rep to choose the date and time. Luckily, this only requires a point and click, and then we're done. To complete this branch, we click the icon once again. We'll change the step this time to a done step. We'll paste in some text and choose an outcome. Then we press apply. Now let's complete the no branch. First, I'll paste some instructions for the sales rep, and then I'll add an updatable status field. This is easy too. I just choose status from the list of attributes that are available from the drop-down box. Then I'll paste in some text in the prompt field and an answer. And to complete this branch, we'll add an end step like I did before, except this time I'll set the outcome to no. The final step is to fill in the later branch. Again, we'll just make this an end step, and we'll set the outcome to later. And that's it. Our guide is complete. Let's save our work before we go any further. The logic of our finished guide matches almost exactly our original scenario. To make our telesales guide available to all Salesforce users, we simply press the Publish button and it will immediately appear in the Guide section of the lead view. So just to recap, using Cloud Extend for Salesforce, I built and published from scratch a telesales wizard that any sales rep could use when making a telesales call. The wizard encapsulates a best practice and automates many of the tasks that would normally be performed manually by the sales rep. So now let's take the same scenario and build it in Visual Flow. We'll follow the same pattern as we did before. So we'll present the finish guide first, and then we'll use Visual Flow to create it. So here's a lead record that contains a script section just like before. The only difference is that now we have radio buttons instead of a question and a set of answers. We'll select yes to move to the next screen that will collect the date and time for the demo. However, notice here that we can't collect a time because Visual Flow doesn't have a time capability. Also now just press next. And the other thing to notice is that Visual Flow doesn't automatically refresh either, so we have to go back up to the top of the screen, do a manual refresh of the lead page, and then if we scroll back down, now we can see our results in the activity history. So now let's build this application in Visual Flow. Before diving into the tool, let me first explain some of the overall architecture of the solution. It's necessary to do this because Visual Flow doesn't automatically provide the object context like Cloud Extend for Salesforce. So the script is embedded in a Visualforce page, and that Visualforce page acts as a bridge between the lead view and the flow. The view passes an object ID to the flow, and the flow uses the ID to set up the context. Now, because these elements are all interdependent, we need to create them in a specific order. We'll create the flow first, then we'll activate the flow, then we'll create the Visualforce page that embeds the flow, and finally add that force page to the lead view. So on to the first item, the flow. This picture represents the whole flow that we're going to build. So as you can see, there's a lot more to it than Cloud Extend. So we've got a section first that finds the right lead record and sets the context using the object ID that was passed from the Visualforce page. We're going to display the telesales script and then collect the answers via the radio buttons. There's an explicit logic step that we didn't have before, and that's going to test the result of the radio buttons. There's a branch for each of the answers, just like we had before. And finally, there's a branch that either updates or creates Salesforce objects appropriately. So now let's use the Visual Flow tool. To access Visual Flow, I'm going to go Setup, Create, Workflows and Approvals, Flows. And then I'm going to press the New Flow button. The progress bar appears, which means this is a Flash tool. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a variable. And this is going to store the object ID that's passed in from the eventual Visualforce page. Again, it's not necessarily very intuitive that I need to create a variable first rather than create a screen for my script. Then using that object ID, I'm going to do a record lookup to find my lead record. So I'm naming and giving a unique name to this record lookup element. And I'm going to look up, as we see here, the lead record, and I'm going to put in a query parameter that the object ID equals the ID that I passed in from the Visualforce page. Now, I'm very familiar with this tool, but I hope you can already see that a business person is unlikely to have this much technical knowledge in order to create the telesales wizard for themselves. So here I'm just storing some data that I'm going to use later on. Again, I need to know that I'm going to use that later. So that's found the record, and now I'm going to do a quick decision or a test to see if the record actually existed, so I've got the right record. So here I'm going to test to see if the record lookup that I've just defined was true, equals a global constant here, true, and press OK. Oh, that gets me every time. I need to set a default outcome, so the value of that decision. And now I'm going to add another outcome if I didn't find the record. So lead not found. The global constant of false there. Okay. Now let's drag on a screen element there. We have to uniquely define a screen name and a unique name for the screen. And I'm going to add a display text element, and that's going to actually hold my telesales script. Now again I have to give that a name, and here's where I paste in my script. So already you can see it's not quite as intuitive as the screen builder in Cloud Extend. I'm just going to do some formatting here. I have the format tool on the left and sort of the output on the right. And there's not a preview like there was with Cloud Extend either. Let's add a radio button. And let's define the radio button values. So let's first give the radio button a label. Can I set up an appointment? And the choices are, we'll make that a required field. And the choices are, we'll create a new choice. The label for that choice will be yes, and the stored value of yes. We'll add another choice. Create a new variable, a new choice here. The label is no, and the stored value of no. Press OK. And finally, the last choice. Create new choice, the label of later, and the value of later into this field. There we go. Press OK. And OK. Now we add another decision element that corresponds to each of those answers, a yes, a no, or later. So once again, I'm defining the name for the decision element and defining an outcome for each of the connectors. So say the screen choice field from the previous screen. Scroll down here. Oh, that gets me every time. I need to set a default outcome. There we are. My default outcome will be my yes outcome. And let's add the other two. My no outcome. The radio button field equals my choice of no. And finally my third outcome, which is my later outcome. And repeat that choice. There we go. Equals choices later. And now we can close the dialog. So far we've just dragged the elements onto the palette, so now let's connect them up. So I'm defining if I find the lead, I'm going to do this screen, then I'm going to do the decision. Let me make our record look up the start element by pressing the green little icon there. And then let's just dummy up the outcomes, the yes, no, and later. So here's a step in my flow for the yes branch. For the no branch, we're just going to update the lead status. And for the later branch, we won't actually do anything right now. We'll just mark it as later. And we'll connect those outcomes correspondingly. So yes, a no, and this connection will be the later. By now you can see I've spent double the amount of time building in Visual Flow as I did with Cloud Extend, and I'm still nowhere near finished. In addition, I still have to activate the finished flow and create my Visual Force page. So let's look at those things right now. Activation is like publish from Cloud Extend. So I find my completed flow and I press the activate link to make it ready for consumption. Now we can add the activated flow to the Visual Force page. Visual Force page development is quite straightforward for any developer, but it's not something that business people can do without an extreme amount of technical knowledge. So just watch as the page gets coded with the call to the Visual Flow. The very last step is to add this Visual Force page into the lead view. And this should be straightforward and common knowledge for any of Salesforce administrator or user out there. So we go into the lead page layout, add a section, and drag our new Visual Force page into that section. Finally, we save the view and we're done. So there you have it. What's the difference between Cloud Extend for Salesforce and Salesforce Visual Flow? Well, we've seen that Cloud Extend for Salesforce is built for business users. It requires no programming knowledge or concepts. It provides all of the data context around the Salesforce objects and will work on any mobile device. And it really is much quicker and much more simple to use than Salesforce Visual Flow.